Welcome to our Wednesday morning weekly Tanya Shir. Thank you for being here with us. We are studying Perek Daled of Shaar Hayichud ve'emunah. Actually, with Hashem's help, we're going to conclude Perek Daled of Shaar Hayichud ve'emunah. If you're using a Hebrew Tanya, we're on Daf Ayin Ches Amud Beis, or on page 156. If you're using a Lessons in Tanya, we are holding. We're holding on page. We're going to start from page 863, where it says "Ukashem she'ein biyacholos." Actually, in the Hebrew, that's actually in Daf Ayin Ches. We're going to review a couple of lines. Kashem she'ein biyacholos. Yeah. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe here is teaching us about the concept of Tzimtzum. This is going to be a very big focal point over the next couple of Prokim of Tanya, this idea of Tzimtzum. Why are we talking about the idea of Tzimtzum? How is this relevant? How is it necessary? So it comes, the idea of Tzimtzum is brought here to us from the Alter Rebbe to answer a question. The question is, if Hashem's creation of the world is constant, is ongoing, Hashem recreates every created being constantly, to the point that it has no existence in and of itself. In and of itself, it's really just something that's constantly being recreated by Hashem. No independent existence. Not just that it has no independent existence, but actually it can be compared to the light of the sun as it exists within the sun itself, where it exists in a state of ayin ve'efes mamash, absolute nothingness. So if that's the case, the Alter Rebbe asks, if the world is so bottled, if the world is so nullified and one with Hashem, then how is it that we don't see it and we don't feel it? None of this is revealed. And until you learn Tanya, this is like a very theoretical concept. And even after you learn Tanya, it's something that one has to really reflect upon and think and learn to live with, and really the apparent existence of the world and of reality around us doesn't seem to reflect this at all. So the Alter Rebbe asks this question. The Alter Rebbe asks, why is the world not bottled b'metzias, completely nullified in its existence to its source? In other words, it really is, but why isn't it revealed, and why isn't it felt, and why is this like such a state secret, that you have to learn about it and hear about it, and it turns out that this is the most fundamental truth about the very DNA of our actual existence in the most fundamental level. So how is this so completely lost on us? All right, so one answer the Alter Rebbe gives in Perek Gimel is because we're talking here about a lakus. And a lakus is something which is difficult for us to see. We have physical eyes, right? There's a famous story about the Rebbe Rashab and his brother when they were young. So they used to play Rebbe and Chassid. So the Rebbe Rashab would be the Chassid, and his older brother would be the Rebbe, because his older brother was older. His name was the Razor. So the story is that the Rebbe Rashab, as a youngster, goes into the Razor, his older brother, and he says to him, "What's a Jew? What's a Yid? What's a Jew?" And the older brother answers, "A Jew is fire." That's what he said. Children, a Jew is fire. So the Rebbe Rashab grabs his older brother's arm, he grabs the Razor's hand like this, and he says, "If you're fire, so how come when I touch you, I don't get burned?" And the older brother answers, "Because you're also a Jew, and you're also fire. When fire touches fire, you don't get burned." So one answer that the Alter Rebbe gives is, what do you mean? Why don't we see it? Why don't we understand it? Because we're looking with eyes that were also created by Hashem. Our tools, the tools that we're using, are physical eyes. And there's an expression that Alter Rebbe uses here in Perek Gimel of Tanya. Gashmias hanivra v'chumroyim amoshay. The physicality of the created being, its materialism, its substance. Our eyes are made of the same stuff that the world is made of, so we share the same plot that the world does. All right, this is one element of the answer, but still doesn't really answer the question. Okay, so what about all of existence, everything, including our eyes? How is it that we're so clueless about the most essential elements of the very core of our existence? So to explain this, the Alter Rebbe brings the concept of Tzimtzum, the concept of Helem v'Hester. And basically what he explains is that we refer to Hashem as HaGodol and HaKipor. In Chassidus and Kabbalah we call this the Midas HaChesed and the Midas HaGvora. And just like Hashem, together with Hashem's ability to reveal and to create and to be manifest and to give forth and to be Magala and to reveal of himself, so in just as much the same sense, the Rebbeinu Shalom Eibishter has the Midas HaGvura, where he conceals and he hides. Okay? So again, if you have a Tanya in front of you, and then Hashem hides himself. So you can create a world which is completely dependent upon him, completely one with him, and in a state of complete bittul. And the world is completely, and at the same time, the world is completely unaware of its own relationship with Hashem. If you have the Tanya in front of you, Daf Ayin Tes, Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the bottom. Just as none of us can understand the greatness of Hashem, the chesed of Hashem, the revelation of Hashem, which is responsible for the ability to create yesh ma'ayin, and to give it life. As it says, Hashem creates the world through midas chesed. Just as we cannot understand how Hashem created the world in the first place, so we are unable to understand Hashem's gvura, which is Hashem's attribute of tzimtzum, and that ability to hold back, to refrain from giving chayas, migdulasei, from his greatness. Hashem's gvura, Hashem's tzimtzum, does not prevents a revelation of this godliness to be manifest upon everything that's created. Rather, it creates this concealment. Hashem's gvura is responsible for creating this concealment. Shehachayis, that the godly force which creates the being and perpetuates its existence, mistater beguf hanivra, completely hides itself in the created thing. Ukeilu guf hanivra hu davar bifnei atzmai, and to the extent, and Hashem hides himself so much that it appears and it feels as if the created being exists independently. Ve'enoi hispashtus hachayis v'haruchnius ki hispashtus haziv v'or ma'ashemesh elu davar bifnei atzmai. But rather, this tzimtzum, this concealment of Hashem creates a reality in which the existed being feels itself as something separate from Hashem, not like the rays of the sun that emanate from the sun, that are completely dependent upon the sun, that are completely one with the sun, that are nothing without the sun, rather like something that exists within its own right. Although in truth, of course, these created beings of Hashem are not really independent existence. They don't really exist on their own. But rather they are completely dependent on Hashem, like the light of the sun that comes from the sun as it exists within the sun. Nevertheless, Alter Rebbe, this is the answer. This is the power. This is the power of Hashem, Asher Kol Yochel, that has no limitations and can do anything. To constrict, to conceal the life and the spirituality that comes from the breath of his mouth, and to hide it, so that the physical or that the being which is created should not be nullified in existence, but it should feel itself. It should seem as if it itself exists independently. This is impossible for any created being to understand. That on the one hand, Hashem can conceal himself so much, and at the same time created. The fact that Hashem can create it and conceal himself at the same time, this is beyond our understanding. It's as much, the Alter Rebbe says, it's as much impossible, as much as we cannot understand it's as much of a mystery to us, as much as we cannot understand how Hashem created it in the first place, how Hashem brings these existences from nothing into something, so it is as much of a mystery how Hashem can do that, and at the same time conceal himself in such a way that this is not apparent at all. This is what Alter Rebbe writes here. Again, a lot of this needs to be understood, but we're walking a tightrope here between covering ground, right, learning the concepts, and doing our best to understand them as much as we can. So the Alter Rebbe is saying here, we're not just talking about two attributes of Hashem, right? Two items on Hashem's program. Hashem creates the world and conceals himself. It's more than that. The Alter Rebbe is saying they're both as much of a mystery to us. In other words, if you want to know how much of a pele it is, how much of a miracle, how much of an amazing thing it is that Hashem hides himself and that the world doesn't see him, how much this defies any type of understanding, the Alter Rebbe says it's as much of a mystery as the fact that Hashem created the world in the first place. Just like human beings cannot wrap their heads around creating something from nothing, can't. Right? For that matter, we can't take something and turn it into nothing either. But there's no way for a human, this is completely b'cheik haboira, only a creator, right? Even lahavdil goyisha philosophers, lahavdil, have come to this understanding that to create something from nothing, this is not within the framework of a human being. Says the Alter Rebbe, as much as that is easy for us to understand, that we cannot understand that something from nothing is a sheer miracle and a divine act, says the Alter Rebbe, so it is just as much of a pele. The Alter Rebbe doesn't use the word pele. The Alter Rebbe uses the word ein b'seichel shum nivra lahasig. It's not conceivable for us at the set that the Rebbeinu Shalom can do this, and at the same time conceal himself from this completely. Conceal himself from this completely. In other words, to create created beings that are completely unaware of him. It's as much of a miracle that Hashem does that he both creates. There's two miracles, Agadol v'Agibor, that he creates it and conceals himself in this altogether. Okay. This is what's written. At this point in the Perek, there is an open square bracket. The Rebbe explains in one of his many famous sichos in Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah that from here, actually, until the conclusion of Perek Hey, is actually in parentheses. It's one long bracket. The discussion about this concept of Shem Elokim, of Midas Hagvura and the concept of Tzimtzum, the discussion here will continue in the beginning of Perek Vav. And the Rebbe has a whole explanation into why the Alter Rebbe inserts what follows from here, why the Alter Rebbe inserts it over here. The explanation of the Rebbe is long and very abstract, so we'll cover some of the ideas of it. For now, I just want to add one note of explanation here. And then again, we'll study the brackets. From here, maybe we'll even conclude the entire chapter today. There's a famous story in the Gemara about, if I remember correctly, it was about Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa. Right, so the Gemara says Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa was very poor, and there was no oil in the house. One week, by mistake, when it came time to prepare the Shabbos candles, so there was no oil, so his daughter, the Gemara says, put, by mistake, without realizing, she put vinegar in the candle holders instead of oil. And when she realized what she did and that there was no oil, she went to her father and she cried and she said, look at this, we're so poor. We have no money, we cannot even afford to buy oil for candles for Shabbos. Instead, I put in vinegar in the candles. What are we supposed to do now? Right, you may have heard the story. The Chassidus quotes this line very often. Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa responded, quote, Mi she'omar l'shemen v'yadlik, yoymar l'choymetz v'yadlik. The same Rebbeinu Shloim, the same Eibishter who makes oil burn, can make vinegar burn too? What's the difference? Is it more difficult for Hashem to make vinegar burn than it is to make oil burn? What's the difference? As far as Hashem is concerned, it's the same thing. Right? Who decided? Oil burns, and vinegar doesn't burn. Who decided? Hashem. Hashem has none of these types of limitations. Hashem can do it like this. Hashem can do it like that. What's the big deal? And the Gemara concludes that when it came time to light the candles, they lit the candles, and even though it was vinegar, it burned as if it was oil. All right, she's told as a miracle of Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa. Parenthetically, when we were in yeshiva, we had a very special mashpia. I may have shared the story with you before, but we had a very special mashpia, an individual that the Rebbe referred to as a makubal, as a Kabbalist. His name was Rabbi Wolf Greenglass, may his soul rest in peace, may have a lichtige Gan Eden. And he told us a very similar story to this story in the Gemara about vinegar in the candlesticks. He told us a very similar story about the Baal Shem Tov, which I love to repeat because it's such a profoundly beautiful story. He said that the Baal Shem Tov, one night in the middle of the Russian winter, he woke up his shamash. He woke up his helper, and he told in the middle of the night, and he told him, I got to go to the mikveh. So his helper, who wasn't particularly intelligent, as was the custom of Rebbes, to always surround themselves by less than intelligent helpers, so that the helpers wouldn't, ask questions or notice things. His helper says to him, Rebbe, but the mikveh is closed. So the Baal Shem Tov says, we'll go to a different mikveh. All right. The shamash doesn't know what he's talking about, but he gets paid by the hour. So he puts on this big, heavy fur coat in the middle of the Russian winter, and he says to the Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov says, take with you a hak. A hak is a pick, like an axe, and a lantern. So he realizes the Baal Shem Tov wants to go to the river, and he's going to ask him to make a hole in the ice, and the Baal Shem Tov is going to toil. Fine, so he takes his pick and he takes a lantern and he thinks to himself, it'll take us 10 minutes to get to the river. It'll take God knows how long, 20 minutes to make a hole in the ice. The Baal Shem Tov will toil for, 10 seconds, and then we'll go back. He figures if I have an hour's worth of fuel in my lantern, it'll be plenty. Anyways, they go outside and it's freezing cold. Russian winter. They go to the river, and he puts down his lantern, and he picks up his axe, he picks up his pick, and, after a couple of minutes, he starts to peel through, he starts to crack the ice, and make a hole, of course, because the ice only freezes at the top, underneath there's always water, and he breaks through, and he makes a hole big enough for the Baal Shem Tov to toivel, and the Baal Shem Tov goes in the river. But instead of the Baal Shem Tov, rushing to come out of this freezing river, the Baal Shem Tov is taking his time. He tovels once, and twice, 3 times. And Nebuch, the poor guy, is standing there on the side, in his fur coat, holding this lantern. And the Baal Shem Tov is toveling. So my Greenglass said it, the Baal Shem Tov toveled for so long, Baal Shem Tov was in the river for so long, that the fuel in the lantern that the shamash had bought was going out, was finishing. So when he realizes they just have a couple of minutes left, he tries to get the Baal Shem Tov's attention. The Baal Shem Tov is toveling in the mikveh again and again. He tries to get the Baal Shem Tov's attention. He says, Rebbe, we have to go back. It's dark. We're not going to be able to see where we're going. We could fall and trip. Chas v'sholom, I'm out of fuel. So the Baal Shem Tov tells his shamash, he says, what's the problem? Bend down on the ground, pick up fuel, and put it in the lantern. Get to the shamash, doesn't know what he's talking about. Bend down on the floor, pick up some fuel. It's only snow on the floor. Anyways, but that's all the Baal Shem Tov says, and the Baal Shem Tov keeps toveling. So, and the Baal Shem Tov's not going anywhere. And of course, the shamash can't go anywhere without the Baal Shem Tov. And he looks in the lantern, and he's got a couple of seconds left. So without having any other choice, he bends down, he picks up a huge clump of snow, because that's all there was around, and he puts it in the lantern, and it bursts into flame. And there's plenty of fuel, and the snow burns. After a while, the Baal Shem Tov is done. He comes out of the river, and they start walking home. And as they're walking back, the Alter Rebbe says to him that tonight a very special neshama is coming into this world. And this neshama the job of this neshama is going to be to take something which is frozen and to turn it into fire. There's nothing as cold, says the Baal Shem Tov, as human intellect. Nothing as frigid, nothing as insensitive. It's a very scary word. There's nothing as insensitive and as cold as human intellect. Human intellect is apathetic. Human intellect is indifferent. It's cold. It's spiritually cold. It's spiritually cold. Right? Look what's going on today in all the institutions of intellect, so to speak. All right, they happen to all be very stupid, but it's all done under the guise of intellect. Nothing is cold, says the Baal Shem Tov, as intellect. And there's no fire that's greater than Hashem. And this neshama that's going to come into the world tonight is going to be able to get the cold intellect of a human being to burn with the fire of godliness. 9 months later was Chai Elul, the 18th day of Elul, the day that the Alter Rebbe's neshama came into the world. On the same day, of course, as the Baal Shem Tov. And this was the night that the Alter Rebbe's neshama came into this world. And the Baal Shem Tov said, and that's the reason why he had to toivel in this freezing mikveh, right, where the river is cold, but he's the Baal Shem Tov. He toiveled in the mikveh. And this is the reason why the snow is burning, because it's going to be within the power of this neshama to teach Chassidus, to take the greatest concepts of divine intellect and communicate them to a human mind in such a way that the human mind can burn in the Baal Shem Tov's lantern with the fire of Elokus. All right. It's similar to the story of the Gemara. The Gemara says, Misha Amala, the Charachlim ben Doisa said, if Hashem says oil can burn, then vinegar can burn too. Beautiful. Okay. What the Gemara is inherently saying is, it's not a bigger miracle for Hashem to make vinegar burn than oil burn. Yes, Hashem set up the system of the world in a way of nature, right? In a way of Teva. But Teva doesn't define Hashem. Hashem himself is not bound by Teva. Actually, as far as Hashem is concerned, it's if tomorrow morning the sun rises in the west and sets in the east, all human beings would go out of their minds, right? Wow! But actually, as far as Hashem is concerned, it's not different. There's an expression in Sforim that Chassidus quotes, that Teva, that what we call Teva, is really just Nisim Ritzufim, is really just miracles that Hashem does on a consistent basis. So when Hashem does the same thing over and over again, we call it Teva, we call it nature. But it's really just as miraculous. Okay. You're all familiar with this. If that's the case, based on this, I want to ask you a question what the Alter Rebbe is saying here. The Alter Rebbe is saying, just like no human being can understand, how Hashem creates the world in the first place, as much as that is a mystery, so it's also just as much of a mystery how Hashem does this, and at the same time conceals himself completely. This seems to be the exact opposite of what we just said. Imagine the same. Just like Hashem does a mystery and makes oil burn, so too Hashem does another miracle and makes vinegar burn. No, we say the opposite. We say, since we don't understand how Hashem makes oil burn in the first place, therefore it's no different if he makes oil burn or if he makes vinegar burn. It's not any more, Rabbi Chanan ben Dosa said, it's not any more of a pella, it's not any more of a wonder how vinegar burns, it's the same thing. Oil burns, vinegar burns, as far as Hashem is concerned, it's the same thing. It seems like what the Alter Rebbe should have given the answer differently. It seems like the Alter Rebbe should have said, you're asking me, how is it possible that Hashem created the world and Hashem's essence, Hashem's existence is not manifest in the world, right? The Alter Rebbe should have answered, what kind of a stupid question is that? We don't understand anything anyways about creation, right? You come with a question, how could vinegar burn? How could vinegar burn? What's the answer? And how oil burns, you do understand, like we spoke last week, right? You don't understand the digestive system of animals. You try to understand Hashem. You don't understand anything anyways. Not only does Alter Rebbe not say that, the Alter Rebbe goes the exact opposite direction. He says, pay attention to the words. Says, this idea of Hashem concealing himself, ein b'seichel shum nivra. It's impossible for any created being to understand how Hashem conceals himself, and that at the same time, in other words, the idea that Hashem creates it me'ayin liyesh, yesh ma'ayin, and still conceals himself, this is as much of a mystery. This is as much of a mystery. This, that Hashem conceals himself, is as much of a mystery as Hashem creating it in the first place. It's not the same mystery. Right? Alter Rebbe is not saying, listen, the whole thing is a mystery anyways. We don't understand it anyways. Finished. End of discussion. No. He's saying, just like you can accept that this is a mystery, and this is the greatness of Hashem, that Hashem does something we don't understand by creating Yesh Ma'ayin, so too you have to understand that Hashem did another pella with another midah. Midas Hagvura, he did something else and he hid himself in the process. Why is that an additionally fantastic miracle? Why doesn't the Alter Rebbe just say simply, we don't understand? Why are we analyzing and dissecting so much what it is that we don't understand? Just say we don't understand the Mefardik. Finish. No, we don't understand this and we don't understand that. And just as much as this doesn't make any sense, so too this doesn't make any sense. Hashem did this wonder and that wonder. Why is there so much discussion about what we don't? This is an incredibly important idea in the learning of Chassidus. Why is it so important to talk about what we don't understand? Versteht man nicht is what? So what do you want from me? So I don't understand. You have to rub it in. I don't understand this. I don't understand that. Sounds like Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa was right. We don't understand why oil burns, and we don't understand how vinegar burns. It's not any more of a pella for Hashem to make vinegar burn. Here the Alter Rebbe is saying Hashem did two things. One with Midas HaChesed and one with Midas HaGvura. With Midas HaChesed he created the world, and with Midas HaGvura he concealed himself in the creation of the world. So I want to make two quick points. Number one is a very obvious point, right? In the case of the oil and the vinegar, they have no consciousness. They have no minds. They have no awareness. At least not, the way we do. So Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa said, this can burn, that can burn, it doesn't make any difference. In other words, the oil and the vinegar in Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa's story are both just inanimate objects. They're both unaware. So just like Hashem can chop down the tree with this axe, Hashem can chop down the tree with that axe. What's the difference? Whereas over here, we're talking about consciousness. We're talking about something that Hashem did give us. Hashem gave us minds. Hashem gave us eyes. Hashem gave us awareness. So it's not enough to just say, we are aware, we're not aware, big deal, doesn't make a difference. Right? Who cares? We understand what Hashem does. We don't understand what Hashem does. It's the same thing. No. It's not that simple. Hashem empowered us. Hashem gave us seichel. Hashem gave us minds. Hashem gave us awareness. This is not something that Hashem is planning to take away from us. Till 120, and then after that, the awareness is on a neshama level. Even on a physical level, we have awareness. So to say that Hashem does something, and that we're to us, with us, and that while it's going on, we're completely unaware of what it is that Hashem is doing, this is not the same as saying Hashem makes oil burn and Hashem makes vinegar burn. There needs to be an additional effort here, that there needs to be another stage here, that Hashem does this in a way that we don't understand what it is that's going on. All right, that's a very simple point. But on a deeper level, there's something incredibly important that cannot be missed over here. The Alter Rebbe is saying something very important. The Alter Rebbe is saying like this: when Hashem creates the world, He created it with His Midas HaChesed. What does it mean that He created it with His Midas HaChesed? That means there's a manifestation here of Hashem. That means that the world comes from the divine letters of Hashem. It's not like Hashem, so to speak, had this happen outside of himself, if you will. It's not like Hashem, said, "Listen, I'm gonna stay here. You guys do whatever you want." He hired a couple of employees, and he's like, "Go ahead, do your business." No, Hashem is involved here. We call this midas hachesed. The attribute of kindness means Hashem is giving. There's a hashpah, and Hashem is giving to things, like I mentioned before, which have consciousness. Now, those very things which are coming directly from Hashem's chesed, they themselves have to be created in such a way that they're completely unaware of Hashem's existence. When the Gemara says, Rab Chanina ben Doisa said, Hashem can make oil burn, Hashem can make vinegar burn. What's the difference? It's like saying, a teacher can teach you this, a teacher can teach you that. A person can climb this mountain, a person can climb that mountain. It's not different. It's the same amount of effort. Hashem created the heavens, Hashem created the earth, Hashem created spiritual existences, Hashem created physical existences. Okay. But now we're saying something else. Now we're saying when Hashem creates them, Hashem doesn't create them as something separate from himself. There's a relationship. There's an investment. There's a good word. There's an investment in part of Hashem who's invested himself in the creation. So midas hachesed, the chesed attribute of Hashem says, if this is an extension of me, if this is an expression of me, if this is an extension of me, then the world should be a godly place. Now you have midas hagvura that, so to speak, fights with midas hachesed and says, yes, Hashem is going to create it completely, yesh ma'ayin, and the existence of the world will be completely unaware of it. In other words, it's not midas hachesed. It's not that the gvura. It's not Hashem is doing this. Is creating the world in such a way that the world doesn't feel his existence. It's true, but that's not the depth of it. Alter Rebbe is saying there's two things that are going on here. They're going on here simultaneously, and both defy our understanding in equal ways. It's chesed and it's gvura. Hashem is here, and Hashem is concealed. Hashem is expressed, and Hashem is concealed. He's revealed and concealed at exactly the same time. This, the Alter Rebbe says, defies the understanding of every human being, just like Hashem's creation of the world defies the understanding of every human being, because it seems like the chesed of Hashem, kindness, should be manifest. Should be revealed. The kindness of Hashem, the way we understand it, should want that all of existence should be aware of Hashem. Can you think of a greater kindness than the world being aware of Hashem? As far as chesed is concerned, this is the greatest kindness. And gvura comes and conceals it. So Alter Rebbe says, this is another mind bender with exactly the same intensity as the first mind bender. Okay. V'hinei, open brackets, just a couple more lines. V'hinei b'chinas ha-tzimtzum v'hester hachayis nikra b'shem kelim. V'achayis atzmoi nikra b'shem or. So when we talk about these two ideas, the chesed and the gvura, the revelation and the concealment, Hashem being invested and Hashem hiding himself in the process, these two things we don't understand, these two opposing elements in Elokus. So in the language of Kabbalah and Chassidus, they're also called Oiris and Kalim. Kalim or Kalim and Oir. Just as a vessel will conceal that which is within it. So it is that this Tzimtzum Achase u'mastir Oir v'achayis ha'shefeya. So it is that the Keli, just like the Keli, conceals that which is in it. So the Tzimtzum conceals that which is the light and the life that comes from Hashem. The hakelim, now in the language of Kabbalah, the hakelim hein oisius. The kelim are these letters we spoke about at the beginning of Tanya. The letters that Hashem emits, the 10 utterances, which become the source of all of creation, of all of existence. These can also be called kelim. Sheshoshan hey oisius mansapach. That their spiritual source is from something called the 5 letters mansapach. We're not going to get into that now. Shehein hey gvuros. It's the source of the 22 letters. We spoke about this in the beginning of Tanya. The 22 letters that are responsible for the source of all of existence. Black fire. It's fire which is black. Black fire. The Atik Yomin. Is known in Kabbalah. This is from the highest levels of Chesed and Gvura, referred to as Chesed and Gvura of Atik. What does that mean? It's not for now. But the Shoirish, the source of all of this, it can also be called Oiris and Kalim. Oir being the light and the life, the Kali being the Oisius, the letters which are responsible for the creation of all of existence, just as the Kali conceals the light, that which is within it, so to the Tzimtzum, the Gvura conceals the Oir which is within it, conceals the godly revelation which is within it, and which is within all the world and all of its existence. All right, we'll stop over here. Thank you very much for being here with us today. With Hashem's help and the mercy of Hashem next week, we will continue with Perek.